Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Now, if you're sitting on something about Shortcut to a Miracle, don't just sit on it, do something about it. I'll take just a moment to tell you that this class is it's quite different than any other class you will probably take in any of our Science of Mind courses. It's kind of the book was written to introduce our teaching outside of religious science, to bring our wonderful teaching out from under a candle. And it has done that. It is still a really good selling book. I was going to say top selling, but it isn't a top selling book. But it's a wonderful, good selling book at Amazon. It is an award-winning book, easy to read, profound truths. And we gently but firmly move from the beginning through an overview of this entire teaching. It's quite an experience. And that's why the course has to be 10 really packed weeks. And I will also tell you that those of you who take the course, please plan to spend some time with it, because it's a course that you will find as it comes together. It's really quite awesome. When I finished the first full draft and I read it from beginning to end, I can't tell you how moved I was by what was there. It blew me away. I could not believe, after a simple 4 years of writing, that it came together the way it did. And it was, I knew, and I truly say this with great humility, it wasn't a channeled book, but I was as open as I could possibly be, as this, everything that I knew, heard, the things that came to me in the writing, that just the right things came across my path, and it was quite a miracle. So anyway, I would love to see you in the class, and I can really, with great confidence, assure you of a really good experience. So, January 9th, talk with either Reverend Marcia or myself or Rick. And what I want to talk about today is 9 steps to living with miracles, because we don't have to take a class, we don't even have to be religious scientists to live with miracles. We live with miracles or without them based on basically how we think. And we all know that. We know, and we've heard this for many years, change your thinking, change your life. James Allen said this years ago, and it's just such a truism. Change your thinking, change your life. But it sounds almost like it's a little bit of a Pollyanna thing, and it's not. And you will learn both in the class and in this talk today. Amazingly enough, as I was beginning to put some of this together, I had the most incredible material come out of nowhere, just in fact as recently, well, night before last and then again last night. That was absolutely blow away stuff, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is blowing my mind. So anyway, I will be sharing some of that with you today. Some years ago, actually the study of the physiological effect of positive thinking, we'll call it positive thinking. This has really come into the fore in the last maybe 20, 30 years, 40 years at the very most. And we heard about it with Nadia Comaneci, if you remember, the Romanian, that wonderful little bounce around. And she would sit there, she would stand there, and she would see a perfect performance, and she'd nod her head, and she would do a perfect performance. And that was one of the first public expositions of our teaching and its application. And here it was in the mind of an athlete. And her wonderful coach, who still coaches today, winning athletes in the bounce around stuff. But some of the primary work that was done by a man named David Burns. In 1980, he published a book called Feeling Good, and it was dedicated to the changing chronic depression. And he used a technique called cognitive therapy, which was positive thinking. And the incredible thing was that shortly after he published this book, they did scientific research on the work that he had done, and they found out that with medication, you were actually able, and people would change the way they talked and thought, their brain chemistry changed. Their brain chemistry actually changed. Now then what they found out, and this was not Dr. Burns doing the studies of his own work, it was other people, other scientists. They found out that you didn't have to have the medication. It was simply a change in thinking that would cause these changes in brain chemistry. Now, this was absolutely mind-boggling. So what I want you to know, and part of the takeaway of today's talk is twice as much is known today about the brain as was known as recently as 1980. Over 100 times more is known about the effects of contemplated neuroscience than was known in 1990. Over 100 times more is known today about the positive effects. So, in the last 20 years, we have learned, and this is pretty new information, we have learned that the brain actually takes the shape of whatever the mind rests upon. So if your mind, we have patterns of thinking, and Reverend Bill read from the chapter in Shortcut to a Miracle where we talk about basic patterns of thought, such as complaining and this and that and the other thing, and what they are we identify. But then later in the book, chapter 9, which is one of the heaviest, most powerful chapters of the book, which has 11 chapters, we learn that things like resentment, regret, guilt, and a lack of self-worth, the feeling of a lack of self-worth, are overwhelmingly powerful. And when, at the time this book was written and published in 2004, and it was really, I guess it was started writing about maybe 1999, 2000. So we didn't have some of this information available, but I knew that something really happened, and that the powerful things, the voice inside, the subtle voice of resentment, guilt, regrets over the past, and a feeling of a lack of self-worth were overpowering things that clouded. It's almost like a day like today. It's a nice day. It's a wonderful day. It's not a bright sunny day, is it? The sun is out, but there's a filter here, and it's here. No matter what you do, that filter is here. You can go out on the beach, and you are not, even here in southern Florida, you're not going to get a suntan today. You aren't, are you? No, really not. What? No, not today. This is not one of those days, I don't think. But anyway, and if I'm mistaken about that, please forgive me. It's not important. Brain neurons that fire together, wired together, is what scientists have found. This is what the neuroscientists have found. Neurons, brain neurons that fire together, wire together. Now, what is this telling us? This is telling us that when you rest your mind on something, you have this overtone, kind of, it's like a pallor covering everything you think, do, or say. It will actually begin to change your brain in that direction. A physiological change takes place in your brain. And your brain, and your thought pattern, moves in that direction and then reinforces it again and again. It is a reprogramming of your precious brain. So be aware that your brain is vulnerable. It is vulnerable to the ambitions and excuses of others, whether it be misguided parents when you're young and you don't know any better, it doesn't matter. Whether it's well-meaning cultural trend setters who are, again, well-meaning, but they don't know any better. Or whether it's despotic national leaders, politicians in either party, or irresponsible talking TV heads. These people are inputting negative thought patterns that you can accept, please believe me, that change the structure of your brain. Now, as responsible adults, we have a spiritual responsibility, and that's why you're here today. This may not be the specific thing you came for, it probably was not. But you came because you want a life that works better for you and everyone around you. That's why you're here. So as a responsible adult, what I'm telling you is that what goes on our brain in our brain from the outside is vitally important. You must learn to filter it if you want your life to change and stay on a good path where you're living with miracles, where you just move with the family angel on your shoulder, as I grew up thinking. I thought we had a permanent family angel right there. But we have an even higher degree of responsibility to protect ourselves from this self-over voice. The quiet, subtle thing that says, no, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? You can't do that. Or, what if you lose your job? What are you going to do then? And everything you're doing as you're making your cake and hanging the Christmas things. These are the, or the regret for what is past, or the resentment. We live our lives like this. And this is the part of it that must change, because this is the powerful thing that is coming in, firing the brain neurons. This is what science has learned. We know this now for a fact. And I tell you something that blows me away. We know that this universe was created probably in a big bang, some 13, maybe 14 billion years ago, give or take a billion years, you know, it doesn't matter. But we know that it was that long ago. And it has been hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years that mankind has been evolving here on planet Earth. We know that. And out of all of this, think about this. Here's this little space of 40 years, people, 40 years. And we are, every one of us, alive. And we are seeing absolute scientific proof of this brilliant teaching that has been underground for hundreds of years, really thousands. We can trace it back to Pythagoras easily, and maybe Hermes if he really lived. And so here's where we are today, and we are right on this path where we are on the cutting edge of this teaching really going viral, okay? And seeing the scientific proof of it. We are so privileged, it just blows me away when I think of that. But what I want to focus on right now, don't have a lot of time here, but I've got enough perfect time. Susan Jeffers was a dear friend of mine. Her company, Jeffers Press, published Shortcut to a Miracle. They called me to publish it, which doesn't really happen. That was a big miracle. You know, when you have a national author call you across the country and say, we have the manuscript to your book and we would like to publish. What? Are you kidding me? And that is what happened. So anyway, but Susan was a dear friend, and I really want to dedicate this talk to Susan, as a matter of fact, because much of what I'm about to talk here is directly from Susan, or a book that she wrote called Embracing Uncertainty, but it is so applicable, and it addresses the times in our lives when our thinking is impressed in a strong way by what's outside. And you could say to me, Elizabeth, how can I not think about what if you were in my position and you had this, you would be thinking the same way. Maybe I would, but not if I could get a hold of myself and really get myself turned around. And so I share this with you, and I have a piece of paper that you can take with you. So please don't take notes, listen and take in what I'm saying. Don't bother taking notes. I have it written better than you could probably take notes. All right. 9 steps to living with miracles. Now keep in mind, this relates to the god-awful things that happen, not often, but when they do, they're major, and they just really are the hard things for us to overcome in terms of keeping our thinking where we want it to be. First of all, Sandy, where are you? Unset your heart. Unset your heart. And she was talking about this earlier, the importance of this. So what this means is to let go of having to have it your way, having to have this be the way you want it. I don't want my husband to get laid off. I don't want to have to go. I don't want this. I won't have this. Okay, unset your heart. Do the very best that you can. And then breathe a sigh of relief and move from the middle of the drama to become the observer of yourself on the path of miracles. Do the best you can and back off and let Spirit take over. Second, live a life of I wonder. This is one of the techniques for doing this. Live a life of I wonder. Let go of living a life of I hope. As a religious scientist, we might say, I hope I don't get fired. I know I won't get fired. I know I won't get fired. I know I won't get fired. Now, I went through this with someone I was counseling just weeks ago. Instead of saying that, say, I wonder if I'll keep my job. So it's a positive statement. I wonder if I'll keep my job. I wonder if I'll keep my job. Think about that. Does it have a different feeling for you? Then I hope I keep my job. I hope I keep my job. I hope the alligator doesn't get that tush, you know. So you're saying, I wonder if I'll keep my job. And then smile to yourself and say, how interesting. I wonder what comes next. Isn't that a soft, wonderful thing? I wonder what comes next. Choose the path of trust. Number 3, choose the path of trust. We have little control over most of the external world. Therefore, we have 2 choices. We can see ourselves as victims in this universe and in this world. Random things happen, and how could I it really wasn't my, you've heard it all. But choose the path of trust and know that you are not a victim of circumstances. Trust that no matter what happens, you have the inner power to draw something good from it. It's okay. You can draw what's good, leave it, and move on. And if you're thinking, oh, but you don't know, you believe me, I do know. I do know. I would not have the audacity to talk about things like this if I didn't know. Increase your sense of power. And one way of doing this is to cut off negativity in your thinking by affirming whatever happens in my life, I can handle it. Know that you are one with Spirit. almost you can see yourself. I sometimes see myself as a little kid, you know, a little kid. Spirit, God, you know, the God that made this universe. If I can't trust God, Spirit, to know how to do things and to have the ability and the power to do it, then I really wouldn't even want to be here.
Amen.
So I could turn it over, hold on, both hands very often, and just move through this valley of death or whatever it may be. So when we know, when we can say to ourselves, whatever happens, I can handle it, or I will handle it, whichever you feel more comfortable with. If you know that you can handle anything that happens in your life, what on earth is there for you to fear? What can you possibly fear? There's nothing you can fear when you look at that. Number 5, collect heroes who have learned to handle it all. It helps to think of people who have made substantial, huge contributions and overcome great things in order to do that. And one of these would be someone like Viktor Frankl, someone like Ram Dass, who had a debilitating stroke, and it was just incredible how he handled that. This past week, right now, in fact, not this past week, right now, Nelson Mandela. What a hero for this whole world. This man changed the world for everybody here, not just for the Africans, for everybody here, everybody. Nelson Mandela. So, have some heroes in your mind. Number 6, focus on the learning that can come from any situation in your life. You can learn and find strength in anything that happens to you. You can let go of your need for things to be a certain way, and then you can see all situations as a way of learning and growing. And number 7 is beautiful, and I know you've heard this. Embrace the thought, it's all happening perfectly. It is happening perfectly. Now, this is not Pollyanna talk. Pollyanna talk has no place in this teaching, because that's really, you know, with your head in the clouds and your feet in the cow pasty. And that is not what we do. We move out of situations and we take the best with us. We learn and we grow. But the idea and the concept of it's all happening perfectly is a very true and very important religious science concept, and it's this. There is a grand design, and it is happening perfectly, but it is not predestination. That's not the grand design. People think that it is. They say, oh, it's happening perfectly. Yes, God meant it to be this way. Oh, God didn't mean it to be this way. The grand design is so much bigger than we can imagine. The grand design means you're part of it. That means your growth. It means the universal growth. It is so huge. It is all happening perfectly, and we are part of it. We're all part of this universal mobile that is growing, thriving, moving upward. Number 6, focus on learning that from any situation. Focus on riches. Number 8, customarily we do not take note of life's little riches. We simply think about, as a child, the delight that you have with really not having too much to really think or worry about. The fun of growing up, I can only speak as a girl, growing up as a teenager with all your little girlfriends and all the things that you would share. Sure, there were all kinds of gunky things we had to live through to get there, but we went through those things without realizing, or with children, to watch the baby just growing and growing up, and the moments of life. Now, one thing that you can do to enrich the moments of life is to say to yourself, I've had that. You say this as you're enjoying the experience. I've had this wonderful experience. I've had that. And so that what it does, it makes us appreciate everything as we move through it. We take the richness of the experience with us. And we leave behind the need for that as we grow. And that's why as we grow spiritually, we are able to leave behind and move into a different level of thinking. You need to experience this, and I know there are people in this room who do. So that's one of the techniques for that. And the ninth thing is get involved. To be able to when you get involved, it's very empowering to take action. My life has meaning. I will do whatever I can to make this a better world. And then you say to yourself, what is it that I am called to do? And you make a list of whatever comes to mind. Begin by taking action. When you remember that your life has meaning, and it does, it makes it so much easier to push through the fear and live a fulfilling and rewarding life. Your life does have meaning. What you need to understand all the time is that you are created by Spirit out of itself as part of this whole that we call mankind, that we call the universe. And you sing these beautiful things. They have deep meaning. And as you understand that you are created as an integral part of this, it is not complete without you. It is just not complete. You are an integral part. Now, neuroscience now has proof through medical MRIs that the brain actually becomes built up in people who have a meditative or a contemplative practice. The brain becomes built up. The insula, which I read about this last night, and I read it 3 times and I still didn't get it well enough to tell you. It's very important. It's around in the cortex somewhere behind the frontal lobe, and it doesn't really matter. It's important. But this helps a person become more aware and empathic because the insula is responsible, incredible, this thing does everything. It's responsible for tracking the interior state of your own body, among the things that it does, and also receiving the feelings of other people. Now the insula is what grows and develops and gets thicker and stronger and more powerful. This is a major, major, massive change in the brain. Now, the 2 things that we can do in living with miracles are, number 1, just to recap, to guard our thinking, to realize that our brain is vulnerable. Think of it that way. And go into meditation. Remember that we magnify and increase that to which we give our attention. And remember, look for the good and praise it. These are not just simple little words. These are not platitudes. It's not Pollyanna talk. This science tells us what our teachers and mentors, the science that has been, what science is telling us now, tells us what our teachers and mentors have told us, true as long as I've been around this teaching and as long as I know of anything. Take time out every day, to consciously replace the negative images that you may be allowing in your consciousness. Replace them with images of love, wisdom, happiness, and above all, self-worth. This universe is not complete without you. You are totally, completely valuable. And if you cannot find 5 minutes or 10 minutes for meditation, I want to just put it to you this way. Think about this 5 or 10 minutes that you take for yourself. Isn't that nice? You take it for yourself. We take it for ourselves. We communicate with Spirit. And because we take this 5 or 10 minutes of opening just to receive Spirit and have this negativity just kind of leave. When we do that, the negativity will go. It's like striking a match in a dark hall. You don't have to do anything with the darkness. It goes. Just be with spirit. And when you do that, the spiritual thing will take over, and you then have 23 hours and 50 minutes of spiritual openness, clarity, guidance, when the clouds have been rolled back and the sun is there, and you are truly walking on a path of miracles. And that is the truth. And so it is.
And so it is.